Welcome everyone, Dr. Chalam again, and this is our online show, Resolving Diabetes Naturally. I know many of you joined us for the Resolving Fatigue and loved it. And one of the things that I find with our practice is most people can resolve their insulin resistance. So here you go, we have this online show. Today I have a very, very special guest. Tracy has been on the Dr. Oz show. And so she is literally changing the coaching in this field surrounding diabetes. Her mission, and my headphones keep falling off, so don't mind me keep digging into my ears as I speak to her, but her mission is to provide hope and strategies for making the right choices, which put you as a patient in control of your health and life. And this is a message, if many of you who follow my practice understand, I always say the patient is their best doctor. So what Tracy Herbert has done is she's beat all odds. She overcame every obstacle, and wait till you listen to her story. It is absolutely fascinating. Mm-hmm. And all of this is just the power of her mind. And if she can do it, anyone can do it, and she will tell you so. So what she and the way she puts it is, what started off as a celebration of outliving her life expectancy of 20 years, and why was she given that life expectancy, we'll get to know in a minute, became much more as it became a ride of hope for so many. So I don't want to delve a lot into her bio because she's going to be the best person to give better insight into her own journey. So let's go to Tracy Herbert. Thank you so much for joining us on this show. Really appreciate it.
Oh, so glad to be here.
So let's talk about this very intriguing statement of a life expectancy of 20 years. What was that about?
When I was 17 years old, I was lying in a hospital bed, actually in ICU, fighting for my life. We had no clue what was wrong with me. And the doctor walks in and he says, he puts his arms on his hips and he says, "Young lady, you've got juvenile diabetes. You're going to be dead in 20 years. You're going to die with horrible complications. You will go blind. You'll have your legs amputated. You'll never be able to have children." And he turned around and he walked out of the ICU room. And I was like, I had no hope. He gave me no hope at all. Well, back then, juvenile diabetes, you were in the hospital a couple of weeks. Now it's a little bit better. Now they call it type 1 diabetes. But it was so traumatic for me. And everybody, I had to go to classes. I had to go to psychology group meetings because this is such a chronic disease. And back then, you weren't going to live. And so I struggled in the hospital every day going, I'm going to show y'all. I'm going to show you that I'm going to do this. And I got out of the hospital, went back to high school. I was a senior. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that happened when I got back to high school was I was cut from my tennis team because I was sick. And I'm like, not sick. I have diabetes problems, but I'm not sick. Anyway, so everything was going downhill. My first trip out of my house after being released from the hospital, we were going to go see a movie. And my mom reminded me as I'm running out the door, "Tracy, remember, you can't eat anything." Because back then, we were on an exchange program that I could literally not eat anything I wanted except for celery. Yay! Which if you're 17, you don't like celery. I'm just saying. But what I did was I went in to the concession stand clerk and I asked for a small cup so I could get a drink of water. And she looked at me like I was from outer space and she said, "No." And I said, "I'll be glad to pay for the cup." Y'all, this was way before diet soft drinks. This was way before bottled water. Yeah. And she said, "No." And all the weeks of just utter terror, desperation, confusion, and depression, I ran out of that movie theater and I'm screaming, crying, "Why me? Why me?" I was so heartbroken. And I went to bed that night still sobbing. And I thought, okay, Tracy, you've got two choices. You can either be better or you're going to be bitter. What are you going to choose? And at that moment, my life changed. And I said, I'm going to be better. And so from that moment on, I started doing everything I possibly could to learn about diabetes. My poor doctor didn't even know anything about diabetes because back then it wasn't prevalent like it is today. And again, most most people with diabetes have type 2, and there's a big difference between type 1 and type 2. But I kept saying, I can do this. They kept saying, you can't do this. Everybody kept saying, you can't. And I'm like, yes, I can. So I started researching. Again, this was way before the internet. I started researching and learning everything I could about diabetes at a local medical school library. And that was now 42 years later. And I still research every day about living healthy, because without hope, we have nothing. And without the research and the information that we have, you don't feel like you have control. And that's what I love about your practice, is because I took control of my health. And every time I meet a doctor, the first question that comes out of their mouth is, how are you still alive and what are you doing? Because I have no complications, and it's all my 3M formula, and you're going to hear a lot about that, is mind, have the right mindset, mouth, learn to eat to live, don't live to eat, and move, get off our chairs and move more. So I kept researching, and then I got pregnant, not realizing that I could even get pregnant, because back then they didn't think you could. And I was the first person that they think of in Texas that had 2 healthy children naturally in 1983 and 1987 who has type 1 diabetes. So that was amazing. And I continued to have struggles because I was still learning what I call it old school medicine. And I kept thinking, this isn't working in my life. And I'll give you an example. Every morning for breakfast, I ate what was considered a healthy diabetes diet. I mean, every organization, every dietitian, everybody said, this is what you eat to be healthy. And I would take the massive amounts of insulin I needed, and then my blood sugar would still spike, and then it would drop. Now, when I was first diagnosed, we didn't even have home blood testing machines. I mean, this is how long I've had it. But then I started getting a finger stick, and I could start saying, this is not right. So I would journal every day saying, look what's going on with my blood sugars. I'm not a doctor, but I knew that this was not good for me. And my doctor kept saying, no, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. Well, I started changing my diet, and I started only with breakfast. Yeah. And I started eating leftover salad and leftover protein, like salmon, a little bit of, meat, whatever I ate the night before. And what shocked me was my blood sugars were steady. I would check it I checked my blood sugar before I started wearing continuous glucose monitor. I was testing my blood sugars probably 25 times a day. And when I started making what I thought was little changes in my breakfast alone, and started seeing, not only did my blood sugar stay level, but I had more energy and I didn't get sluggish. And then I would still, in corporate America, going out to lunch, and then I would eat all the unhealthy foods like the pizzas and the pastas and everything with everybody else in meetings. And then the same thing was happening. I was like, man, my blood sugars are spiking, then my blood sugars are crashing, and I feel horrible. And I'm like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board, Tracy. So then I started thinking, okay, you're eating salad and lean protein for breakfast. Let's try it for lunch and see what happens. I was amazed. Not only, again, my blood sugars felt so much better, but I had more energy. And I've never had much of a weight issue, but I started noticing, things are going differently. So anyway, those are kind of strategies I've been doing. I've always exercised because I knew the importance, because when I was researching in 1977 and realizing for people with diabetes, exercise is so important. And I've always loved to exercise. To me, that's not even a prescription. It's just something I've always enjoyed doing. So every decade after my diagnosis, because again, I chose to be better, not bitter, I do something crazy. And so every decade I do something huge. Well, as my 40th anniversary of my diagnosis approached, I wanted to do something big, because not only am I a mother, but now by this time I'm a grandmother, and I was never supposed to have children. I was supposed to be dead, and I was supposed to die with horrible complications. And so I decided, what are you going to do, Tracy? And I thought, okay. So I got on my bicycle at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and I rode my bicycle all the way to New York City, to the Brooklyn Bridge, 3,527 miles. And was it easy? Of course not. But it's no different than living with diabetes. But once you start taking control, and for me, taking control of my diabetes was huge, because I kept thinking, I can do this, I can do this. And the same thing about my bicycle ride. Every day when I was going up elevations like you wouldn't believe in the mountains, I would think, okay, Tracy, this is no different than living with diabetes. You just learn to adjust, rest when you need to. And my life changed dramatically, not just during that ride, but 42 years beforehand, realizing we can take control of our mental aspect. It's all mental. And as a teenager, when all my friends were eating pizza, and I'm thinking, well, okay, Tracy, you could eat the pizza, but you'll die, because that's what I was told. I would imagine mice running over the pizza, or rats, and going to the bathroom on it. That's what I mean, visualization worked for me, and I didn't want the pizza. So I would sit back there drinking my little glass of water, and I'd watch all my friends eating pizza, and I'm visualizing it. So I've learned all these crazy things that's helped me to live a healthy life. And so now I don't even want to eat those kind of nasty foods, because it makes me sick to my stomach, because it makes my blood sugar spike, then crash. And so it's so much easier to do things you enjoy, like eating healthy. And people always say, oh, I don't want to eat healthy because there's nothing good to eat. There are so many wonderful options out there. And when you start feeling better, your life changes.
Absolutely. There's so much that I want to ask you about. So when you were 17, right, when all this unfolded, how did you have that kind of a mindset? Who was your supporter?
Well, my parents, bless their hearts, they were so strong. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how you could watch your child laying in an ICU unit, not knowing if you're going to live that moment and then be told that horrific news. But I just kind of think, I guess I was raised differently in the 60s and 70s than a lot of people were. But I was raised that you're strong, you're independent, you could do anything you want to. And so I kept telling myself, I was sick for so long before they finally diagnosed me. And I kept thinking, if I could just find out what was wrong with me, I would do so much better. But it was really that moment in the hospital when I was so mad at that doctor, because I kept thinking, come on, somebody give me hope. I mean, that's what I kept saying is, there's got to be something good about this. I mean, I'm taking, learning how to boil syringes and taking shots all the time. But I kept thinking, there's got to be more to life than this. And so I had a meeting one afternoon with a group of men who had adult onset diabetes, now called type 2. And we were in a support group, which I wasn't sure why I was in the support group, because all they had to do was give up a couple of things of food. And one of the men were saying, I can't have chocolate cake anymore. I can't have eggs anymore. All the things he kept saying he can't. And I threw all my paperwork down in this hospital education center. And I said, I'd give my right arm to have your problem. I've just been told I'm not going to even live to be your age. I'm not going to ever have children. You have hope. I have no hope. Well, he came up to me a few hours later in the hospital and came into my room. And he just told me, he said, you changed my life. He said, you gave me hope when I didn't realize it could be so much worse. And I think it's because of that. I just was angry. And then I started seeing, I can help people. And back then, that was, of course, before HIPAA. And every once in a while, when there was a child diagnosed with diabetes, the hospital would call me and say, would you please come and talk to the family and the kids and let them know? And I just became stronger and stronger in my desire to help people. But what really transformed my life about 10 years ago was I met somebody who he had type 2 diabetes for about 10 years. And he asked to meet me for lunch. We have a mutual friend. And he asked to meet me for lunch. And he was telling me that his blood sugars were in the 350s. And I said, wow. And he said, my doctor said that was okay. Well, number one, there's not a doctor in the world. I'm going to say that. There's no doctor in the world that would say that 350 blood sugars are fine. But he'd already lost sight in one eye, and he was fighting to save his other eye. And he was in his 30s. And I was like, and so I started really realizing, people not just need hope, but they need help. And if nothing else, so many people need accountability, because you doctors are so busy. I mean, that's what I love about your practice, though, because you can take it up a notch. But you walk into a doctor's office, and usually you just have a few minutes with your doctor. And he wasn't getting the information he needed. And I kept saying, we've got to, how can we do this? And so that's when I became my mission to stop the epidemic rise of diabetes, because it's becoming critical in this world, how many people have diabetes, and so many children have type 2 diabetes, which used to be called adult onset. It's criminal what we're doing to ourselves.
Absolutely. And I know that's very important for those who are listening. The type of diabetes you have, you don't have your own natural insulin. The cells that produce the insulin have been damaged, whatever damaged them. It's usually an autoimmune condition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of the diabetes which we see today, it's almost 8 out of 10 are type 2, where they have a high amount of insulin, their own insulin. The pancreas is producing a lot of insulin, but the body is not responding like it normally does to the levels of sugar, where it takes in the sugar into the liver or the muscle for storage. That's not happening because all of those buckets are full. I mean, if you really look at those compartments. So, but the principles are the same when it comes to changing the nutrition. But in your case, what I am hearing is there was so much of negativity surrounding your diagnosis. You had that desire to hear something positive. You really wanted that. And just by accident, you seem to have made a difference in somebody's life, and suddenly you realize, I'm giving hope to someone, and this is really what I'm seeking. So you had that empathy. You understood that this is what should happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're looking at in something that you said was very significant, where you said in the past juvenile diabetes was type 1. Now juvenile diabetes can be also type 2. I mean, it's not called juvenile diabetes, but
Right.
we're seeing more in children. And the most important thing of what you're saying is the mindset. And that's the control that everybody listening needs to understand. So even if you have type 2 diabetes, what Tracy is going to be saying is very important. It applies to you also. Now, my practice is mostly, we're very big believers in Plan Strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a huge believer in lots of fibrous, starchy, squashy foods. Type 1 diabetes is the only type of group of people where I get them on a low carb diet. When I say carb, like literally there is nothing even closely relatable to grains. And now we're in a better position because we can make nuts look like grains. You know, you get the almond flour, you get the coconut flour, and so many other things. So since you have the three parts, the mindset, you spoke to it all this, all this while, where how it made you want to prove other people wrong, because this was important to you. Every human being needs hope, number one. Every human being needs to get appreciated. But I want to talk to you about the second M, which is mouth, which also you alluded to very briefly, with how you noted that you wrote down everything. You found that the salads and the meats actually kept your blood sugars on an even keel. What do you feel, having had diabetes for this many years, have you seen a change in the medical system? How they approach a new onset type 1 or a type 2 diabetes? Have you seen a change in the nutritional coaching that patients receive? And what would you tell somebody who's getting the traditional teaching, or that's the only option they've ever known? What would you tell them? How would you shift them to think a little differently, and what should they be doing?
Those are some great questions. I highly respect the medical field. First of all, let me say that, because without you all, I wouldn't be here today. But what I still struggle with is so many physicians, and I lump physicians in my mind totally different than a lot of people, because physicians are healers, and there's several. Anyway, I'm going to be very cautious how I say this, but. What scares me more than anything is there's so many physicians out there today that still practice medicine that was taught 42 years ago when I was diagnosed. And I do have several doctors that I see that I actually take medical research, that they're willing to look at the research and say, wow, I didn't know this. But I haven't been to a nutritionist, dietitian in about 10 years, and it was required before I went on my insulin pump. But if I ate what I was taught then, I wouldn't be alive today. And I still hear people in the medical community, in the food industry and all that saying the same thing. You got to have 60%, of your meal carbohydrates. And it just frightens me when I hear that. And then I met a little boy and his mom, and he's also type 1, and he's eating French fries. He's eating chicken nuggets and everything that, as a treat once in a while. I used to have a little piece of chocolate cake when my kids were having their birthday. And now when my grandkids, I'll have a little piece of cake because I don't do it very often, but I want to be able to be part of the community. But when you keep feeding garbage into your body, and I'm sorry, but that's what it is. When we eat processed food, it's garbage. And I was in the impression from my medical team that I still currently use that I am underutilizing nutrition because I don't eat as much meat as I should, and I don't eat as many carbohydrates as I should. And I actually had to sign a waiver saying that I release them of all liability. And it just blows my mind. So my suggestion is do your own research, but make sure it's based with science and it's peer reviewed. I mean, there's some great opportunities to find all sorts of really important medical information on the internet. Now, you have to be careful because there's a lot of snake oil salespeople. And I talk about that a lot because they do as much damage, in my opinion, as what a lot of the medical people I was just talking about. But like people like I love what you do in your clinic because you give hope, but you're giving them people like me so much strategy, because up until 5 years ago, I was eating carbohydrates like there was no tomorrow, and I was just taking more insulin for it. And that's crazy because even if you don't have diabetes, it's still not good for you because it causes inflammation.
Right.
And that's where the mind is. My 3M formula, all kinds like a cog. If you picture a cog, where they're all three synergistic, because without the right mindset, you're not going to eat right. When you don't eat right, you lose your mindset. When you don't exercise, your mindset goes away. So it's all three so important to work together, because when we have the right mindset, and we know we eat to live, we don't live to eat, which is what I say in mouth, but it all starts with my mind. And even times I didn't feel like it, when I was just going through my transformation of really changing my diet, I would say, I eat to live, I don't live to eat. I wouldn't mean it, but I would speak it out loud because I was saying, I can do this. But it breaks my heart how many people today are still being given information that I received 42 years ago from the same medical kind of people that believe that I should be taking more insulin. No, I shouldn't. my A1Cs are remarkably well. I'm telling you, I'm not going to share because I don't want to make anybody feel guilty because my A1Cs are so good. But what the point is, though, A1Cs are just a trick. I mean, not a trick. It's just A1Cs are just a tool. That's the word I was looking for. But when your blood sugars are level all the time, that's important, because when you have those huge spikes of highs and then lows, that's not good for our body either. And that's why eating lots of fiber food. I mean, when I treat myself, I have a sweet potato. That is a treat for me. And normally my husband and I split it. I mean, that's a big, big treat, because I don't like to eat that many carbohydrates. And any carbohydrate I get now all comes from vegetables.
Absolutely. There's so many nuggets in that. So this is what I want to highlight these. Mm-hmm. So when you said sweet potato, I can tell you the number of diabetics come to me and they say I can have sweet potato and their sugars would go high. They say I can have beans and their sugars would go high. So what I have noticed, this is where what your message really needs to hit home to those who are listening. The traditional medical system, which I was a part of, I would say is usually behind by 17 to 25 years. The gap is actually increasing. It's becoming more and more because the research coming out at such a high and a fast pace. And they're actually publicizing it. I think the internet has connected us more than ever. So in the past, I think we had a previous conversation where I said in the past I needed to update myself once in 10 years. Now it's like every 30 days we got to update ourselves. And not all doctors can be specialized in everything. Like internal medicine, it's almost impossible to be an internal medicine doctor without having a predisposition to treating something specific. You're good at something. Similarly, an endocrinologist, who's the specialty a typical diabetic would go to, can be sometimes better with thyroid or pituitary tumors than with diabetes. So then they have the diabetologist who gets specialized in this, and you will be amazed at how many of them still talk about carbs because they have a registered dietitian in their office who will tell you how important these carbs are for your well-being. The challenge is for a type 1 diabetic who do not have the automated insulin that can go up and down with your sugars, you as a human being can never calculate the right amount. I know a lot of my patients will say this many units of insulin I need if I consume this many carbs, and I find their A1C always out of whack.
Yeah.
Before I get into the A1C, it's a 90-day average of blood sugars. So if you're extremely high and extremely low, the average will be almost normal. And sometimes the A1C can actually mislead you because you will say, oh, my A1C is 6.2. I think my doctor thinks that's awesome. Normal A1C is 4.8 to 5.2. I don't see any reason why a diabetic should be higher than that because as far as I know, diabetics are normal human beings. And so they have the right to be within the normal range that somebody who's a non-diabetic gets to be. So that's the point number one. So for you, when you started making these shifts in the diet and where you started visualizing the diet that is that is what we call entertainment, like nutrition, food can be nutrition or it can be addiction or entertainment. So the entertaining foods in your mind, you made it like totally unworthy of being put inside your body. How would you explain to a person who has been told, I mean, this is indoctrinated from the day you get diagnosed with diabetes, you get to see a registered dietitian, you get to see your diabetologist, and all the conversation is about carbs. How does that person defy their medical team, and where can they go and look up the research to help themselves? Because I think a well-motivated person doesn't need this help. Most of us don't want to, it's almost like I don't want to defy authority. And when somebody's gone to medical school, they've worked very hard to get there. They're really smart people. They've studied this. How can I defy them at the same time get their help? Like you need your insulin, you're going to need a doctor to prescribe that. How do you keep them? I think that's very tactical, very diplomatic. You need to be. How did you go about doing that?
Well, I'm a very analytical person, so I keep records of everything, and I probably have records for 42 years of everything I've done. But what I realized is, okay, it's a partnership. And I used to feel like that my doctor walked, with his head up high, and he was the best person in the universe. And he and I he just recently retired, but 38 years we worked together every 3 months, seeing him. And he kept telling me I was wrong. And I'd say, okay, let me just see what's working. And that's what's important for everybody to know, because what works for me may not work best for you, because we're all so uniquely different. And so what I started doing was documenting every single thing that went in my mouth every single day. Everything from the moment I woke up, I would document every water, every coffee, everything I did. And then I would do how I slept that night, or how I perceived I slept that night. I felt like I didn't sleep very well, or I slept really well. I had more energy. I even, how long I exercised, what my blood sugar was before, what my blood sugar was after. I was the first one, I say this all the time, it's not true, but I was probably the first one in the entire world that started testing their blood sugars before and after eating, 2 hours before and 2 hours, just because, I wasn't probably, but just because I'm analytical, but I wanted to see, because how do you know what you eat and 2 hours later if you don't check your blood sugar?
Right.
And that was just something I had first made up, was 2 hours. And then my doctor started saying, I'm going to tell other people to do that. But I kept showing him, and I love this man. I mean, he really helped me through my diabetes for 38 years, helped me with having 2 healthy children, no complications at all in my pregnancies. But I kept showing him, I kept saying, look at the research. So I'd always print out research. I'd say, look what I'm doing. Here's my food log. And I don't just do a food log for one day. I'm doing food logs for weeks, because one day, how do you know that's actually true? 1 week, how do you know it's true? Because everybody's different. If you have a bad night's sleep, I'm going to tell you my blood sugars goes up.
Yes.
Even if I don't do anything different. If I'm stressed out, my blood sugar goes up. But somebody else with type 1 diabetes, their blood sugars may go down. I mean, it just all varies. So I brought in the documentation, and he would sit there and he'd say, this is crazy. Of course, this is also the same doctor that said, as long as you have an A1C of 7 and under, I'm okay with that. I know. And then now my new doctors also said the same thing. Your A1C is too low. And that's why I love what you say, because I say, why should I be any different than somebody who doesn't have diabetes?
Yeah.
So I just highly recommend, number one, don't get discouraged, because discouragement is not going to help. But just start doing everything you can. But really, I laugh because I'm so in tune with my body, that because of the fact that you have to be, you have to understand what my triggers are, because I'm a very type A personality, which is very difficult when you have diabetes, because when you're type A and you start letting stress get to you, my blood sugars go up. Again, somebody else's blood sugars may go low. So just document, now we have electronic tools. It's easier to document. But, there's so many apps out there that are good. But I highly recommend that when you look at research, though, please look at, like your, website, my website, because everything I have and everything you have shows the science behind it. I don't believe in just saying, eat this and your blood sugars will be fine. Because it's a lot more than just eating. It's a lot more than just exercising. It's look at the whole body. How much water do we drink? When we're dehydrated, which I didn't know this until I started wearing a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. I didn't realize that when I was dehydrated, that my blood sugars would go up. No idea. But now I know that information. Of course, I drink more water than the average person, because that's pretty much all I drink, other than 1 cup of black coffee and green tea. But that's another factor that I was trying to tell my doctor, my endocrinologist, was that when I first started this journey, and I'd say, I'm having a cup of coffee every morning, and my blood sugars are going up. What's going on? And he's like, quit putting sugar in it. I'm like, I'm not putting anything. I drink a black cup of coffee. And he kept saying, you're putting something in it. No, I'm not. So anyway, come to find out, caffeine raises my blood sugar.
Absolutely.
But if we don't have the tools, so everybody's different, but you may have a blood sugar that you can't figure out in the morning. So think about sleep. Think about, maybe we're dehydrated. Drink water. I always drink a glass of water when I first get up in the morning. That's my first strategy, because I believe in the importance of hydrating the body. But then look and see what triggers it you're doing. Caffeine may cause you a problem. It may not cause a problem.
Right. 2 things that bring down your blood sugars in the morning. One is taking a heavy dose of vitamin D, almost in the 5,000 units, and drinking 2 cups of water. Immediately, you'll see a drop. And blood sugars high in the morning means you probably have a small dip in the middle of the night. So it's extremely important to wear the continuous glucose monitor. In fact, I recommend it for every human being. If we can measure it, let's measure it, because we live in a world that's very abundant. And we're the only species that's so confused about our food, because we don't know what is really food. I mean, most people don't know, besides chicken nuggets and French fries, as anything else as food. And most of us have lost the art of cooking at home. So I think the continuous glucose monitor is awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is, number one, don't get discouraged. Do your research and listen to your body. I mean, it's very simple. These tactics are very simple. You can do it on your own. The only time you need help is from the knowing. You know that you have to do it, but you're not able to do it. Then that bridge is where you need help. A coach like you or a practice like mine can actually help people get to that point from knowing to doing. So the last M, move. Now this is one I will tell you. I personally simply, if I can't even use the word hate, if there's something stronger than hate, you can put it in there for exercise, right? And I'd rather just like sit down and enjoy life. But I understand movement is such a crucial part of our well-being. It helps your brain function, helps so many things. How do you get people to become, the couch potato to becoming getting interested in movement? What is, for you, you naturally loved exercise, so I don't think that was a big hurdle for you.
Mhm.
But I'm sure in your coaching, you come across people who say, I just don't like exercise. What do you tell them?
That's my favorite client to work with. I love that. And I'm going to give you an example from my bicycle ride across the country, because I stopped at a red light waiting for the light to turn, and a lady had just gotten off her bus. She was waiting at the bus stop, and she just happened to lean over and say, man, I wish I could ride my bike across the city. And I said, well, I'm riding across to New York City, but okay. And then I just had that gut feeling I need to go talk to her. And she was a sweet young lady. She's probably in her early 30s. 250 pounds overweight. I mean, overweight. I mean, she needed to lose that. And she was so embarrassed because she had to wait for somebody to come pick her up. And so I started coaching her and giving her some ideas. And everything I say, she said, I can't do it. And so I finally helped her. Can you walk to the end of your driveway? And she said, I think I can. Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. So then we worked on strategies, going back and forth, resting, going next door and resting. Well, by the time I got to New York City, I received a text message from her saying, I just signed up for my first 5K walk.
Oh
I mean,
my God.
I know, it makes me cry. She says, I didn't even realize the weight was come off. She says, I'm walking 3.5 miles now, or 3.1 miles, and I'm excited. And I thought, that's so simple. But, you know, it's so easy to get extra steps in the day. And I don't like the 10,000 step rule because everybody's different. And
Yes.
I would hate to only be able to walk 10,000 steps, but I'm different
Totally.
because I'm one of those crazy people. But for you, that might not be the thing. But, you know, when I talk on the phone, which I talk on the phone a lot, unless I'm needing to take notes, I walk around. I have my earbuds in and I just walk because that's an extra way to get steps. When you're watching TV, which we all watch TV, get up, set the alarm if you have to every 30 minutes and do jumping jacks or walk in place or whatever that looks like. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. That is so simple. And my favorite thing to do, and it's a competition with myself, but I like to park the car as far away from the front door as possible.
Yes.
And I will park even further away as if it's safe. I mean, I don't do that at night as much, but park the car further away. There are so many little things. You don't have to go buy memberships at expensive gyms. You could get a jug, an old empty milk gallon, and fill it up with water and just lift weights with that.
Yes.
There's some bands that I just love to use. And I became a certified personal trainer back in 2004, I believe, because I was trying to help some ladies who were trying to get into exercise who were pre-diabetic. And I thought, I love to exercise, I'll do it. But there's so many things. So what I'm saying is you don't have to hire a certified personal trainer. You could, you could always hire me if you wanted to, but there are so many things you can do. And there's oolus and oolus of things on YouTube that you can watch.
Right.
And the most important thing is don't feel like you have to go out and buy any fancy clothes. Hey, just go for a walk. Getting out in nature is so important. And I'm a huge nature lover. And what I love to do is I take off my shoes and I walk outside, which when you have diabetes, you have to be careful with your feet. But I believe in grounding because that's when we get back to where we are. I mean, we have energy in the universe and we use grounding and it lowers blood pressure. I mean, it does so many wonderful things. So I actually walk barefooted sometimes and I always check my feet when I'm done to make sure that I don't have any problems. But just go for a walk, grab a friend, and just find somebody to help you stay accountable. Because at 5 o'clock in the morning when I work out, if I had to struggle with it, I would call my neighbor and say, hey, come go walk with me if she was available, you know. But work out at the time that works best for you. If I had to work out in the evenings, I wouldn't get my workout done. I like it first thing in the morning because that's what works best for me. It's all about finding what works best for you because you're going to do it over and over again. If you watch TV, the old school TV that has commercials, walk in place during a commercial. When you're working at the office, set a timer every 45 minutes. There's even apps, and get up and walk away, walk around. Go talk to a coworker and send an email instead of sending an email or something. There's just simple ways to get out and get some exercise because it is critical because our bodies were not created to sit like it is today. And it's critical because as we age, and I'm almost 60, I'm real close to almost 60, but I have more energy in my late 50s than I did in my mid 30s. And it's all, number one, about having the right mindset. I say I love to exercise because I do, but you may want to say, hey, I like to exercise. And then you'll eventually start believing it when you set your alarm and you have your workout clothes ready the next morning, or you say, I'm going to do this no matter what. But don't beat yourself up when there's a setback because we all have setbacks. We're all busy, but just taking a few extra days, a week even, just to get something started. And then after you get done with the I'm tired, this is not fun, you're going to start having more energy. But don't forget when you work out to drink a lot of water. And you don't need sports drinks. Sports drinks are filled with sugar. Unless you're doing a bicycle ride across the United States, which I've hiked it up and down the Grand Canyon several times backpacking, then I will have a little Gatorade or something because I need to replace my electrolytes. But now I actually make my own, which is just lemon and water, but no sugar. But but I didn't know that back then. But the thing is, though, you got to make sure you're drinking lots of water and don't fill it up with that nasty sugary stuff because that's not going to do anything but bring you down, both emotionally and mentally.
Absolutely. I want to, before I getting to that part when you said about Gatorade, that's an advice which is coming from the medical system even today. When you exercise, drink Gatorade. To diabetics to have Glycerna, which is a protein drink. And as far as I'm concerned, those things should have the same warning labels that cigarettes have on them, right? This is injurious to health, and just like really drink it at your own risk. Because if you look at most of these drinks, sugar is the first ingredient, and majority of them, or corn, or maltodextrin, or maltodextrose, different names of sugar. But people believe they need to be on a very high protein diet, which is the other misnomer for diabetics. It's not the protein. There are of the three groups of foods, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Proteins and carbohydrates raise your sugar, but fats do not. And the only thing that keeps your sugar down, the two things, is fat and fiber and fasting. So talk a little briefly about, as a type 1 diabetic, and I'm sure definitely as a type 2 diabetic, what does fasting, how does fasting play a role? Because a lot of what you do is really activity or eating. But do you even do fasting? Do you recommend that? Have you seen improvement in your sugars? What are your take?
I've got to be very careful because this you probably need to talk to your medical team about, because I'm not a doctor, but I started about 8 or 9 months ago doing fasting. And as we're speaking right now, if you were listening to us live, you would know I'm in my 38th hour of a fast, of a water only fast, and some green tea. I did have some green tea this morning, but I'm able to do this for two reasons. I still take insulin, and I will until the day I die or until there's a cure or whatever. There's some people that already anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I do this every week. I fast, some kind of a fast. Either it's a 12-hour fast, it's an 18-hour fast, a 24-hour fast. And now I'm seeing even more benefits in my blood sugar control in 48-hour fast.
Yes.
Because this is what's so interesting, which I don't recommend this at all without an insulin pump if you have diabetes and you're on insulin, or a continuous glucose monitor. Without those two things, I think it might be suicide to try. I don't know, but that's what I think.
No, I agree.
I don't care if you're type 1 or type 2. I highly recommend you try it, because now, like what I'm seeing, and I have to take both a bolus and a basal. So a basal is continual insulin running in my body through my insulin pump. A bolus is what I take to either make a correction or to eat something. So I want to make sure everybody understands what that is. So now in the last 10 hours, I've taken 0 insulin, even my basal, which shouldn't be that way, because my basals and my boluses, the amount of insulin I take, shouldn't matter when I'm fasting, but it's doing something inside my body. I can't figure it out. And I'm seeing this week after week. Now, I didn't see this at first, but I think fasting is so important, and there's so much research around the world about the importance of fasting. And fasting has been done for centuries. And I think every religious group has been fasting for decades. I mean, not decades, for centuries. I mean, I think everybody is fasting.
Every culture, yes.
Yeah, every culture. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. And so I really think that I really did research before I even started doing it. And I now look forward to my fast, which people don't understand, but I feel so much better. I just went out a few hours ago and did a 5-mile run. And, after 29 hours, and I shouldn't feel as much energetic as I do, but I had so much energy. I was running as fast as I normally do on just having a salad and protein. So I believe in the power of fasting for two reasons. The first reason, I think there's something going on inside my body. I haven't figured out quite what it is with my type 1. With type 2s, you know what's happening in your body when you're fasting. But I haven't quite figured that out. But the most important thing, and I put this too, but it's number one, when you realize you don't need to eat, it changes your life. Because now I do break my fast if my blood sugar drops dangerously low, but it never does. I mean, it doesn't do that anymore. But when you realize, and I have a very fond client of mine, and I'm not going to mention names, obviously, but she always had to eat every 3 hours because she was trained, and she kept saying, I'm going to die without food. And now she's like the biggest proponent of fasting in the world. She's like, it took her a long time to realize we don't need to eat. When we need to eat, our bodies tell us. But when you fast, and I hope you try fasting, drink lots of water, because without water, it's impossible to fast and impossible to do it the right way, because it is taxing on the body. And start slow. Even if it's giving up a snack, try something. And then the next time, maybe give up breakfast and then, eat an early dinner. And 12-hour fasts, I think, are probably just as important as 24-hour fasts. I do it for autophagy, though, because I know the importance of autophagy for overall good health, and especially as we age. So anyway, highly recommend fasting. And again, my doctor says you cannot fast. And so I don't even share with my doctor what I'm doing, because I don't want to upset my doctor. I don't want to upset the relationship that we have.
I'll make sure he gets this video.
Yeah.
So,
yes, he wouldn't be surprised, because I do things that are unusual because I know what it's doing for my body.
Right. Just to let the viewers know what autophagy is basically the body eats all the dead cells when you fast. It's the same thing that happens when you exercise. Mm-hmm. So, and same thing that happens when you go into a sauna. So there are so many different ways to help your body. But I would say this, every time you eat, there's inflammation in the body. Every time. It doesn't matter how healthy your food is. And inflammation in a diabetic is probably the worst thing. So the more frequently you eat, the more inflamed you stay. So I think, again, this is not medical advice. Even though I'm a medical doctor, I don't know anybody who's listening. So I'm never going to, do not take this as advice, but as information. Even what Tracy tells you is just information, something for you to research, because you got to do your research. Your body is very different. How you're going to respond is very different. You're looking at a tail end of her journey in discovering her body to the beginning of your journey of even getting to do this. So take all of this as information that you will discuss with your medical team. But these are the tools. What we want to bring to you is there are tools. Your mindset is the biggest tool. What you put in your mouth is going to really make a huge difference. When you begin to move, you get the freedom. And then when you give some rest so that the body can repair itself, it's a game changer. This is the information you get. But how are you going to utilize this information and work with your medical team to get benefits is what you should do very responsibly. I just want to give you that disclaimer before we get to the end of this session, because this is very interesting, because you understand the struggle of a diabetic. Now, I can be seen as somebody who doesn't understand, you're not in my shoes kind of a deal. I just know the disease. What's coming from you, what would be a takeaway message that people can get out of this? That's number one. And number two, where can they find more information about you, and how can you actually help people?
Okay. All right. Well, the most important thing is don't lose hope, because without hope, we have nothing. Whatever your diagnosis is, whatever it is, stop and take a deep breath. Listen to what they say, but then do your own research, but make sure it's sound research. And until you really know what works best for your body, you're not going to be able to make the changes that you need. I highly recommend getting tested for all sorts of things. I did that about 6 years ago, and I found out I'm allergic to spinach. Who's allergic to spinach? I am, and that's not good. So now I know not to eat spinach because it causes inflammation. So find tools. There are so many great resources out there, but the most important thing besides not losing hope is start to learn to eat to live, don't live to eat, because the processed food is coming from the big marketing dollars of the world, and they want you to eat this kind of bad stuff that they know is going to kill you. And when we choose to eat the foods and we choose to do the right kind of exercise and choose to take rest and choose to get a good night's sleep, to rest our bodies, to let our brains repair, life is changing and you'll feel better. It's going to be difficult at first. I'm going to tell you, 42 years into this journey, it was hard at first because at first everything was failing, I thought. But I was learning, and that's what happens. You know, if you're perfect all the time, you're never going to learn. But doing little things every day equals big change. And when I started my bicycle in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Bridge, if I would have said, I've got to ride 3,527 miles till I get to my stopping point, I would have been totally overwhelmed. But every day I said, I'm going for a bike ride. And the same thing is with our health. Do something every day, even if it's just one thing, and make that change. And then wait a few days and then make another change. But don't start making so many changes at once. And please don't compare yourself to me, because I've been playing this game for 42 years and we're all different. And what works best for me may not work best for you, but I highly recommend you start making some changes. And I offer all sorts of free resources on my website, tracyherbert.com. That's TRACY. No E, so remember that. And also you can watch a recap of my bicycle ride across the United States. It's only 3 minutes, but you're in the bicycle with me. I mean, it's really kind of cool. You would enjoy that. I do a weekly podcast, yourdiabetesbreakthrough.com. I've written 2 best-selling books, Diabetes Tragedy to Triumph, based on back then it was 38 years of research, and then Ride for Hope, which chronicled my bicycle ride across the United States. And of course, I'm on all, social media platforms and everything, but check it out because, if you don't have someone to talk to, that's where life becomes sad. And that's what happened to me in the ICU at 17 years old. And I didn't feel like I had anybody in my team to help me. And so it's so important with your medical team. And it's okay to find another doctor. It is okay if you don't feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
Because that's my mistake. I kept going to the same doctor until I found the one I was telling you about that study, endocrinologist for 38 years. But my doctor that I was using before that at 17 and 18 years old, he kept telling me, you're not going to live. I mean, he didn't give me tools to help. And so find somebody who will give you tools and somebody who's open-minded and willing to listen. And I help people from all walks of life. Some people just need me to help them with accountability. And that may be you because, you get these tools from your doctor, which is wonderful, but then you need somebody to say, okay, how's this going each week? So I offer all sorts of things, but my most important thing is I want to reduce the epidemic rise of diabetes because so many of us can live stronger and healthier lives. And my blood sugar is so good, and I'm so happy, but it's because I choose to have the right mind with my mouth, mind, and move.
Basically, diabetes is a choice. How you live with diabetes is a choice. And it's amazing at in your 50s you get to have no complications. That's more than almost 30 years of being a diabetic without any complications. That's absolutely commendable. And this is a type 1 diabetic. So
42 years. I've had it now 42 years. Yes.
42 years. So I just want people to understand it's not just hope. It is just possible. This is a possibility in life. And this is actually a fact that you do not have to succumb to the complications of diabetes. This is such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I just can't thank you enough. I really appreciate you coming on this show. And for those of you who are going to listen to this, make sure you touch base with Tracy or send us back your feedback as to how this has helped you and how your mindset might have transformed listening to this conversation. Take care.